New from K-Tel Records, 22 explosive hits.
Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be talking about one of the premier new wave bands, post-punk bands, whatever you want to call them. They are the ultimate party band. That's right, I'm talking about the B-52s. Now, I usually like to start these episodes out by telling you how I got into the band, and that's basically just kind of like everybody else. You heard Rock Lobster on the radio and you were sucked into it. There was nothing else like it at the time. It was both adventurous and fun and full of energy, and it really encapsulated what the whole fun idea of new wave was at the time. Not take yourself too seriously, but be pretty damn good at what you do. And that pretty much describes the B-52s. Now let's start off with their debut album. Everybody is familiar with that cover. This was released in 1979, self-titled. The band featured Fred Schneider on vocals and Kate Pearson on vocals and keyboards, Cindy Wilson on vocals and keyboards and other instruments, her brother Ricky Wilson on guitar, and drummer Keith Strickland. This is the album that really started it all. Has the classics Planet Claire, Dance This Mess Around, Rock Lobster. Really fun, full of life. They're a band that you listen to and you can't help but smile. Their lyrics are funny and kitschy and outrageous sometimes. Really full of life. Absolutely wonderful debut album. They followed that up with a very similar sounding album. That was the album Wild Planet that came out in 1980. And this has actually one of my favorite B-52 songs, which was Give Me Back My Man. It also has Party Out of Bounds and Private Idaho and Quiche Lorraine. Great collection of songs. It was pretty much continuing in the same fashion as the debut album. I don't want to call them a novelty band because they were definitely not a novelty band, but the novelty of their sound, that sort of retro, kitschy, goofy, fun party sound was already introduced on the first album, so it wasn't quite as new on the second, but still, it's full of great songs, and that's really what it's all about. It's the songs. And both of those albums were extremely popular. It just made them one of the most popular new wave bands of the era. The next release actually came out in 1981 and was called Party Mix, and what it did is it gave you extended mixes of songs off the previous albums, including Party Out of Bounds and Private Idaho and Give Me Back My Man and Lava and Dance This Mess Around, 52 Girls. Really fun collection. And that kind of brought to a close that particular era of the band, that particular sound. You know, like the first couple albums sound very similar to each other, and everyone's going, yeah, I hope they stay the same. But if they did stay the same, then people would have said, oh gosh, they're not capable of changing. This is, they're a one-trick pony. But B-52s avoided that by releasing Mesopotamia, which was an EP or mini album that came out in 1982. This was produced by David Byrne of Talking Heads. It's far more rhythmic. It's not that jagged new wave of the first two albums. It has more keyboards, and the songs take a little longer to cook and to seep into your system. This was actually supposed to be their third album, but either they ran out of time or ran out of money, or the label ran out of patience. Or maybe they ran out of patience with David Byrne. I don't know. But Mesopotamia was just a great move forward. It may not have been a commercially successful album, like the first two, but in terms of being a fan of the music, it was really something special because it showed that they could remain the B-52s, but still move on from that jagged sound of the first two albums, which is still wonderful, but this is just as wonderful. Now, both Party Mix and Mesopotamia can be found on one CD, and there it is there. It has both releases. And now it was time to move on to the next phase in their career. While some fans were, really into sort of the live sound of the band, drums, bass guitars, keyboard, vocals, etc., Whammy actually introduced a lot of keyboards and synths and drum machines to the band sound. And it focused more on the songs. You weren't hearing that, quirky, edgy post-punk new wave sound. You were hearing something new. It was still, new wave because it had the synths. But I think it took people by surprise that they were moving away from their early sound. But when you really listen to it, it still has the jagged guitar mixed in with everything else. It's just a lot smoother, and lots of great songs on this, including Legal Tender and Whammy Kiss and Song for a Future Generation and Queen of Las Vegas, another great song as well. That's definitely something to check out. Bouncing Off the Satellites. This is an absolutely stellar album, but it's very different. Came out in 1986, and it's really wonderful. It's more synth heavy than Whammy was, more keyboard oriented. It's produced by Tony Mansfield, who was the leader of the band New Music, but he was also a producer, produced Captain Sensible and Aha, Naked Eyes, things like that. So it's really more of a commercial sound. And it's really interesting because Fred Schneider, possibly the most identifiable voice in the band, he actually doesn't appear until the fourth song. So both Cindy Wilson and Kate Pearson beautifully, their voices blend together so well. And there's a bunch of great songs on this album. Summer of Love is great. The Girl from Ipanema Goes to Greenland, Wig, Housework. Lots of great songs on this album. She Breaks for Rainbows. B-52s with a lot more keyboards, synthesizers. Now, sadly, it was during this album that Ricky Wilson died of AIDS, and so the band sort of didn't promote the album. They didn't tour or really do any promoting of the album, and it sort of withered on the vine and did not do as well as it should have. But it's one of my favorite B-52s albums, Bouncing Off the Satellites. Now, it took a few years for them to gather up the steam and the love of music again in order to come back. And boy, did they come back strong with Cosmic Thing in 1989. This, of course, contains the big, huge hit Love Shack and Rome and Channel Z. And lots of great songs on this. Shake That Cosmic Thing. Deadbeat Club's one of my favorites. And this is the expanded version, expanded 2 CD version that has more stuff on it. Really a fantastic record. Now, this album featured production by Nile Rodgers and Don Was, but this sounds more like what it was, a late 80s album, sort of more of a funk rhythmic base to it, but really a fun album, and definitely a return to form for Kate Pearson, Fred Schneider, Keith Strickland, and Cindy Wilson. And of course, this was a hit album. This is probably, apart from the first album, this is probably their most popular album to date. Now, after that, Cindy Wilson decided to take a break from B-52s, and Kate, Fred, and Keith decided to continue, and they released the album Good Stuff. Now, this album kind of paled in comparison to Cosmic Thing. It's not a bad album at all. Nile Rodgers and Don Was back there producing. And as for any band, it's really about chemistry. And losing Cindy Wilson, even though Kate Pearson has a wonderful voice, Cindy Wilson was missing on the album, and that energy, just like Ricky Wilson was missing on Cosmic Thing and each release after that. But it's still a really good album. Unfortunately, it didn't do as well for them, and they sort of took another long break. Now, they toured constantly. It seemed like the B-52s, like every year or two, they'd be in town, which was always great because, once again, they were and are a party band. But it took another 16 years before they returned with the album Funplex, which really brought the classic B-52 sound up to date. You can hear echoes of the first album, and you can hear echoes of their more keyboard oriented sound. You can hear echoes of Cosmic Thing, but it's a very modern sounding album, very, very B-52s, and a really, really fun album, something for you to enjoy. It has like Pump and Hot Corner and Julie of the Spirits, of course the title track Funplex. Really, really, really fine album, but this was their last studio album. They're still a very worthy band to check out. There are a couple compilations out there. One of them, called Songs for a Future Generation, contained 2 studio recordings that were not available on any of the other albums. So I guess you can call those new. And stupidly, I never bought that because I bought the 2 CD called Nude on the Moon. And this is a great Rhino comp. Everybody knows how great Rhino is. And this spans their entire career, apart from Funplex, because this came out in 2002. But this only has one of the 2 new songs that were on Songs for a Future Generation. So I need to track that down too. So do you, actually. You need to track down all this B-52s. If you've been depriving yourself of the world's greatest party band, then definitely get down to your favorite local store, get online, do whatever you need to do. Buy the vinyl, buy the CDs, buy anything you can by B-52s, because they are a fun band and they are definitely worth your while. But thank you for sitting there and allowing me to talk about B-52s. I really appreciate you being here. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, to ring that bell for future notifications, to let me know and everyone else know what you think about B-52s below. And until the next time, remember me, I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. But it took